Welcome back, friends. You're just in time for the Johnny Brew Show.
What's going on, everybody? My name is John Brookhagen, host of the Johnny Brew Show, and welcome to Red Wave 2022, where we get you all of the candidates running up and down the ballot here in Nevada, whether they want to go to Washington or they want to serve on your local school board. The best way to know who to vote for is to get to know these people, and in order to prepare for the Red Wave in 2022, we have to decide who we're going to put on the ballot on June 17th. So, you've seen all the great interviews that have preceded this one. There's a whole bunch of great ones coming up. But before I tell you about our special guest, let me tell you about Infinity the Math Institute, where you don't get more math problems, you get solutions. Play tape. Infinity, the Math Institute. You can reach them at themathinstitute.com. And I know we have the best tutors here in Las Vegas, but we're online. We have Infinity, the Math Institute, Bolivia. We have Infinity, the Math Institute online. And we have Infinity, the Math Institute in person here in Las Vegas. 100% success rate. And don't forget, finals are coming up. We get started on finals preparation nice and early here in April. So if you want to finish the year strong, or if you're worried about something going on this school year, let's finish strong with the last 6 weeks. We'll get you to where you need to be. If you really like this content, I need you guys to subscribe. We've been having a couple problems on YouTube, even on Facebook. So please, if you're already subscribed there, also look us up on Spotify and on Rumble. Well, we just had the 2022 Las Vegas COVID Summit, and all of our videos got banned. But they are all up on Rumble, and they're all must-see episodes. Nobody in the past week, I don't care if you're talking about Tucker Carlson or you're talking about anybody, nobody has had a better lineup of shows every single day released than the Johnny Brew Show, and we need you guys to subscribe and tell a friend. All right, with all that out of the way, this is one of the episodes I have been looking most forward to. We have the rock star of the conservative movement here in Nevada, Mrs. Annie Black, joining us. Welcome.
Thanks
Annie.
for having me. It's good to be here, finally.
Yeah. Current Assemblywoman.
Yep.
And now running for Congress in CD4.
Yes, sir.
And for those of you who know, I always get the district wrong. For you, I got it right. I got it. CD4. It's memorized. So, what do you think?
I think this is exciting. Thanks for having me, and I'm impressed with your math program. That's awesome.
Oh, thank you very much.
I want to say thank you for all you're doing, because Lord knows our kids really need what you guys offer here.
Well,
it's impressive.
We're seeing that more and more each day, and we're doing what we can. But let's talk about you.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, really quick, Stephen Horsford. I mean, you just jumped into a congressional race. You were, I'm going to talk about how I got to know you and everything, but you were wondering about 8 months ago, what should you do? What should Annie Black do? And you were even reaching out to your donors, your supporters, about should you stay in the assembly? Should you run for state senate? Should you do a statewide office? Or should you maybe run for a national office? And it looks like you had made your decision. What led you to decide to run for Congress after being an assemblywoman, a very popular conservative assemblywoman for 2 years?
It was a tough decision. I didn't make it lightly. I did a lot of due diligence and research, talked to all my family, basically everyone in my phone, and said, hey, if I were to do this, would you support me? Spoke to a lot of different people, and ultimately it was a decision that I made later because the environment in Nevada and the country had just gone downhill, and it seemed like Horsford is very vulnerable, and we needed somebody to run that could take him out. And I felt like I could do it.
And you say, because it feels like the country is always teetering on destruction. by the left. I mean, whether you're talking about 2016 and the Russian collusion trying to bring everything down, 2018 with impeachments, 2020 with who knows what's going on with the election, 2021 with the COVID pandemic. It feels like we keep feeling like one more thing and we're in for it. And then another thing happens and everything evolves so much. What was it about Horsford? I mean, we're all expecting a red wave. Are you expecting a red wave even with, say, ballot harvesting or mail-in ballots? And what is it about Horsford that you thought was most able to be beaten?
I am expecting a red wave, and I think that's what's going to help us overcome the situation with the mail-in ballots and the ballot harvesting, because that definitely is something that we're going to have to overcome. And we're going to have some major organization in place to overcome those things. But I think that the circumstances and the environment right now with gas prices and grocery prices and all that stuff is definitely going to give us a bump. And historically, in a midterm presidential year,
right,
the other party has a bump.
Even when things are okay, even
right,
when there's no controversy going on,
right,
every time 2 years in a midterm on a newly elected president, we always see a wave. I mean, the same thing happened to Trump. Trump was doing a pretty good job,
right,
but 2018, we still had all the Democrats come in. Same thing happened to Barack Obama in 2010. The only reason it didn't happen to George Bush, the second, is because of 9/11. So that kind of
change things. Yeah.
Right, but otherwise, for the past 50 years, the second year after a new president, there's always a wave of the opposing party. As I've been doing this research, and we're going to get into your whole biography and everything, but it sounds like you've had your eye on politics almost your whole life. So now you're running for Congress. What was, like, as a little girl, what was your ultimate goal? Do you want to be president one day? Was your ultimate goal to be in Congress or to be a senator? What did you think before you really knew what was going on?
Honestly, I think it was my grandmother who gave me, there was a coin, an inaugural coin, or I guess it was a commemorative coin for Ronald Reagan's inauguration, which was January 20th, 1981, which when I received that, I realized, oh, that was my birthday, right? So I was born on the same day that Ronald Reagan was inaugurated.
Shut up. You were born January 20th, 1981.
Yep.
Wow.
And my family's always been really conservative, so I grew up hearing about Reagan and conservative leaders, and my grandfather worked on Barry Goldwater's campaign, so I grew up in that environment. And when I saw that, it was, I think they call it ignition. It's like when a kid discovers something and they feel like, that's for me.
Right.
And it just felt like that. And I thought, oh, someday when I grow up, I'm going to be the president. And so, you know, in hindsight, that's probably a pretty lofty goal.
Cool.
But
hey, you're on track. You're a young lady, and you're moving up the ranks.
I don't know about that. But yeah, I mean, it's exciting. And so
she was born in 81. She's a young lady.
Yeah. So, well, I don't know, 41 now. So anyways, yeah, so it's exciting. So it's something that I've always loved. And then in high school, I worked on a couple of campaigns. John Enson's campaign was one that I worked on. My then high school sweetheart's mom worked for Enson. And so I did a lot of work.
So even your boyfriend's family was into politics and stuff like that. And then my question, did you ever like run for school board? I mean, in the school, were you ever like the class president or the student council and stuff like that? No,
you'd actually be really surprised. I was super shy in school. And I frankly was not a really big school lover. I was, my family and I were all really close. And so we would always be going to the lake or going to the sand dunes or doing fun things and traveling and spending a lot of time together. So I was kind of a homebody, and I really spent a lot of time with my parents and was an introvert, which is totally strange, right?
Well, I don't know. I'm sorry to get to know you. We have some great pictures, which we're going to show in a second, but you were born and raised in Las Vegas.
Yep.
So, and January 20th, 1981, you went to Bonanza High School. What middle schools did you go to and stuff like that?
I went to Johnson Junior High, and then I was one of the last classes to go through Booker sixth grade center. So I don't know if you know about the sixth grade center, but basically they would load all of us kids that were up in Summerlin. They'd put us in a bus, and they'd ship us all down to Martin Luther King, and we would go to school at sixth grade center, and then be bused home. And it was like a 45-minute ride every single day to and back. And it was an experience. I was a pretty sheltered kid, and there was
things you never seen before.
Yeah, things happening on the bus.
So you went to elementary school up till 5th grade, and then 6th grade, before they turned 6, 7, 8 into middle school, you had like a special school?
Yep.
And these are all kids you probably never went to school with before, or, you know, except for the couple of kids on your bus?
Yep.
And it was a different experience.
It was an experience. And when we were there, one time at recess, there was a drive-by on the street right next to the school. And, like I said, I lived a sheltered life. So
Right.
it was a different experience.
And you were forced to go there? Like you
Yeah,
had
I'm
to?
not sure. I think they were taking kids from the inner city and they were bringing them to the west side.
And trading them out,
right.
like, kind of?
Right.
Like in order to forcefully integrate or something like that?
I think that was the plan. Yeah.
Good intentions? Maybe bad follow-through?
In hindsight, I never really looked back and looked into it and like researched what the rationale was behind it.
Right, because you were 10 or 11 years old.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I'm going to go back and look at what the reasoning was. But.
That's pretty wild stuff. So, and then tell me, Bonanza, you weren't into school. You'd go to school, you'd come home, and then you just hang out with your family. Dirt bikes and quads.
Yep.
I think I saw lake and jet skis. And then you ended up leaving Las Vegas after you had gotten married and had a couple of kids. Why'd you leave Las Vegas and move to Mesquite?
So I got divorced, kind of had a rocky time, moved in with my parents, did some trying to get myself back on track, and then ended up living in Summerlin and raising my kids up there on Far Hills and 215. So really the heart of Summerlin.
Right.
Really loved that area. And then my son was getting into middle school, and the younger one, his friend's dad was in the FBI. And one day I was at the kid's house and the FBI agent's telling me, this park down the road, we've got all these drug dealers going there and like all this stuff is happening. And I, living a sheltered life, really I was oblivious to it all. And one day I remember...
You could have been at the park and they're dealing drugs, but you don't even know what to look for.
And then one day I'm dropping my older one off at middle school and I'm seeing kids smoking and making out and doing all this. And I just thought, this isn't the environment like I want to raise my kid in. And so we had already been traveling to Mesquite a lot because my family's been in business there from basically my whole life, kind of escaping there on the weekends. So we thought, let's just move to Mesquite. And so we did. And that was about 6 years ago now.
And did you find that Mesquite has a better crime situation, a better school situation?
The crime is better, more under control there. I mean, I think anywhere you go, especially with drugs, and because we're right on the interstate, there's a lot of drug trafficking that happens
And we're the
there.
only city here, so anywhere, whether you go in San Francisco to Arizona or you go in LA up to Utah, you have to go through Vegas.
Right, and so the crime situation is better, but I think anywhere you go, you're dealing with drugs. The education, unfortunately, is still horrible. It's still part of Clark County
Mesquite
School
as well.
District. And I won't say the teachers are horrible. I would say that we're living in a different kind of community where it's just there's different needs there, a different dynamic with the families. And unfortunately, even though we're rural, we're still part of Clark. So I would love for us to be autonomous and
do your own thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And what kind of needs are you referring to? I mean, the differences between Mesquite and Las Vegas and what a school should do. I mean, school was never supposed to be a federal issue. School was always supposed to be a local issue because people in Mesquite might need something different from Vegas, where more obviously somebody from Montana needs something different from New York City, a different kind of an education. What kind of an education difference would you like, if Mesquite was able to do their own thing? What would you like to do in Mesquite that they're not doing in Clark County, or not do in Mesquite that they're currently doing in Clark County?
A lot of us moved to Mesquite because we're more conservative-minded people, and we want a rural, smaller, conservative life.
Right.
And I would say things like the sex ed stuff and just being able to control your school the way that accommodates your own kids' needs, right? All of the control on our school is coming from Clark County, which is a totally different, it's metropolitan city, big city, totally different demographic. So we should, I think, be able to control what happens and what our kids learn to a certain extent.
Well, at least have some sort of a say in it. That's why we have local school boards. But meanwhile, like you say, in Mesquite, I think it's Katie Williams.
Yep.
But she's got probably the largest geographical part of the map because Mesquite's so far away and it's rural. So how is, that's your one representative, and Mesquite is only one part of her responsibility. But meanwhile, the board is probably considering things that are going on, like at Fremont Street, where you went to your 6th grade school, or Western High School or Clark High School, which the needs of Western High School and Clark High School are not the same as the needs of, I don't know, what's the name of the high school in Mesquite? Is it Mesquite?
Virgin Valley.
Virgin Valley. I knew that. I knew that. I went to a playoff basketball game up in the Virgin Valley. I remember everybody was like, "Oh, the Virgin Valley trip."
Did you guys win?
Oh, no, we didn't. We didn't. But the school, it was the first time they had made the playoffs in a number of years. So we were very happy to make the playoffs at Western, which used to be a very famous and well-to-do athletic and academic school here in Vegas. And now it's really turned into a race war haven.
That's unfortunately the direction education's going, I hate to say.
So how are your boys doing? Tommy and Taylor?
Tyler, yeah.
Tyler, how old are they and
They're
how
good.
are they doing?
They're good. Tommy is 20 and he's actually interning, helping out on the campaign. He moved out to Minnesota for a little while right before the winter time, which was a weird decision because he doesn't even know, he's a Nevada kid. I don't even think he owns a jacket.
Right, you don't attack Russia in the winter. Exactly. And you don't move to Minnesota in the winter either, right?
Yeah, anyways, kids are going to do what they're going to do, right?
Well, I've been doing some rummaging, and I found some pictures of you, and some of them are super interesting. So I'd like you to see them and tell me the story behind some of them. For example, I'm assuming this is you and your mom, and you were a little blonde girl?
I was, a little towhead, I think that's what we're called. But yep, that's me and my mom and I. And I'm actually the oldest of 10 kids. And so the funny thing is my mom was told after she had me she would never have any more kids, which is ironic, right?
And she popped 9 more out. Wow. Talk about fake news right there.
That's pretty fun. And I thought this was funny because this is glamour shots. I don't know if you remember glamour shots.
Oh, I do. But I was born in 76, so we're kind of the same.
That's terrible.
I didn't want to be mean. Because I love it. I'm obsessed with it. That's the picture. I looked at it like, is that really her? What are we? Is this the quads that you were telling us about?
So this is, we grew up, it's called Black Brothers Court. My dad and 3 of his brothers made this community, so we all kind of grew up there, and that's when they were building their house. And so this is pretty much us, running around on quads and campfires and all that fun stuff. So, yeah.
I love it. And then here's you, blonde again. Your roots are coming in now.
Yeah, but that shirt's great because that says No Obama on it, and that's from. So, I was looking through pictures, and as long as I can remember, I've just been obsessed with politics.
What does your shirt say? It says "Go Obama."
No Obama.
No Obama. I just wanted to clarify.
Absolutely not. Yeah, and then this is my older son and I, Tommy, at Trump's first rally here when he was running for president, and that shirt was when we were in line. It was like, "Oh, I love your shirt, Hillary for prison 2016." So yeah, that was pretty cool, pretty fun stuff. And then this was when Obama was they were passing Obamacare, and my grandma calls my aunt and I and goes, "We got to go to DC and we got to go protest this because they're gonna destroy our country." So the 3 of us got on a plane.
Was that your first time in Washington?
You know what? It was. It was. And so that was pretty, you get to go protest with your grandma. That's pretty fun.
That's memorable. Is your grandmother still with us?
Yep, she
is.
That's
a great stuff. Yep. All right, we're getting a little older now.
Yeah, and so then once I got more into politics, I got to go to this Freedom Works thing in D.C., and so it was clearly we were trying to get Jim Jordan for speaker, so...
So first you were going to Washington to protest, and now you're getting invitations to go to Washington.
Yeah. So,
getting connected.
I wouldn't say, I'll be honest, I'm not hugely connected in D.C., and but I do know Nevada politics, and so when people in Nevada are looking for somebody to send, I think they kind of look at me.
So the people in Nevada trust you to represent us?
I hope
As
so.
opposed to Jim Jordan calling you and telling you to come support him.
Yeah, although I would love that.
Well, you're on your way.
And this is that same protest, actually. I was on, I had blonde hair, and I was on Fox News, and so somebody at home sent me that. I saw you on TV, and so that was kind of cool.
That's super cool. A lot of times I wish we had cell phones. I'm glad overall we didn't in the 90s and 2000s.
Right.
But some of these great pictures, now in 2020, every time you go to something, you got selfies and pictures, and not so much, but that must have been really cool to see yourself on Fox. And this was my favorite picture.
Yeah, so I don't know how they became Astro fans, but there you go.
I thought that was odd.
It's I don't know. I'm not a sports person, so I just support
Well, that's a pretty
whatever
recent
they go
picture.
for. Yeah, that was a couple years ago. So
And which one is which?
Tommy is on the right, Tyler's on the left.
Beautiful.
They're-
And what do they want to be when they grow up? Are they going to be politicians?
I think Tommy has an interest in politics.
You said he was helping your campaign?
Yep. Tyler wants to go into some sort of trade, whether it's welding or something like that.
He likes to work with his hands.
Yep.
Good.
Well, and he's smart. He knows college is expensive and the jobs, don't always pay. The juice isn't worth the squeeze sometimes.
The juice isn't worth the squeeze. I like that. But yeah, I mean, I tell people college is great if you have a plan. You want to go and you want to become an accountant or you want to become an architect. You go, but don't go to college just for the sake of going to college and study some sort of, African dance troupe, from the 17th century. What are you going to do with a degree in that?
Right. Underwater basket weaving or something.
Right. Are you much better off going to a trade school for underwater welding?
Right. Exactly.
Beautiful. All right. So then you ran for the first time in 2010?
Yeah, so it must have been 2010 for the 11 session. Yeah, I ran for the state legislature against John Hambrick. And then that was the year, if I had won that, some things might have gone different in the history of Republican politics in Nevada. But
you got your butt kicked.
I got annihilated. I had no idea what I was doing. And, I think the good news is you learn more through failing than
Right.
being success all the time, which
Experience gives you knowledge that you can't get from a book.
Right.
I mean, no matter how much you read or prepare or think about something, actually doing it is quite eye-opening.
Yeah, and it was the same thing with the legislature and all of the things that I've done, whether it was a city council or anything really. There's always what you think it's going to be, and then there's what it actually is.
So then you ran again when? In 2012 or 2014?
I ran again in 2016. I ran for the 2018. I'm sorry, 2018
Mesquite City Council.
And was one of two Republicans to win that year in the whole state.
What does that mean? You're saying no Republicans won any offices in
No.
the 2018 election?
Yep, only
Seriously?
myself
I
and
saw
one
that.
other.
I saw you wrote that, and I was like, that's not computing. But literally, from everything from a judge, a school board, the governor, to every top to bottom,
Yep.
all Democrats.
All Democrats.
Except for you, and who was the other?
It was Dennis Hoff, actually.
You don't say. And he isn't with us
And
anymore.
he wasn't even alive, so that was kind of... So I guess technically
So
I
you
was
were the only
one.
living Republican to win in the 2018 election?
Well, that's
Pretty remarkable. And that's for the City Council of Mesquite.
Yep.
And that was your first political office.
Yep.
And how was that? I mean, I'm guessing... I know Mesquite's more conservative than Las Vegas or Clark County in general. Were you alone, or were there other conservatives with you on that city council?
We ran the gamut, right? So I was super far, probably the farthest to the right, and then there were Washington, Seattle Democrats, right?
Right.
And so the great thing about municipal government is that 99% of the time it's potholes and
Right.
streetlights and
Right.
public safety. And so for the most part, it's pretty unanimous.
Right, you're not arguing over abortion or gun rights. You're
Right.
arguing about, can we fix this pothole? It
Right.
keeps-
And pickleball courts. That was a big one too. But, one of the things that I really pushed was a transparent budget process. And that was kind of a weird thing. You would get the budget a day before or a couple days before you were supposed to vote on it. And so anyways, just fiscal stuff and trying
Transparency.
Right. And my goal always was to cut regulations from the city, codes and rules, but unfortunately that was met with resistance.
Well, because that's a horrible far-right thing to do. Be
I
fiscal and transparent. I mean, how dare you?
Yeah.
Those Seattle Democrats don't like that.
Well, actually, you know what? City Hall fought me more on that than the people on the council. And that was when I really learned, look, I agree with term limits, and I'm not saying that I'm against them, but that was when I really learned that as an elected representative, you rely so much on the staff and so much on the institution,
Right.
the people that are there through administration
Right.
after administration, that that's a problem we got to solve too.
Well, and we're going to get to issues later, but speaking of term limits, this is something that, I could really argue both sides of the fence, and I don't know that term limits is the answer to the problem that people are trying to address. For example, we have, I'm remembering his dad's name, Rand Paul is, one of our greatest congressmen, and he's a doctor. He's able to ask the questions. He knows how things work. Would we want to lose somebody like that? We just lost Trey Gowdy for the same reason, because he had a self-employed and he signed the paper and whatnot. And I'm sorry I stole you. I should have let you say. I got that because I was just watching your interviews. But nonetheless, sometimes when you're a freshman assembly or congressperson, you got to get your feet wet. You got to figure out how things work. Then by the second time, you could start getting involved. By your third term, now they have accepted you. And then what, are you supposed to quit when you're just getting the ball rolling? Or are we supposed to have our best fighters automatically withdraw themselves because they're going to do a self-imposed term limit? When meanwhile, Pelosi's been there 40, 50 years. The staffers who are running, say you were to win, you're going to go to Washington, you're going to meet a whole team of people that have been working there for the past 30, 40, 50 years, and they're going to be advising you as to what to do. Now, whether they're well-intentioned or not, you're going to have an open ear, whether you follow their advice or not, that's going to be on you. But then by the time 5, 6 years down the road, you finally figured out what's going on, are you going to want to hang it up? Or are you going to want to say, all right, now I know what's going on here. Let me get to work.
Yeah, I think a prime example of that is Trump, right? We elected a great president who was willing to go in and ruffle feathers and kick some doors down. But unfortunately, he was working always against the swamp.
Right.
And the swamp, in my mind, I don't know why, to me the swamp was always the elected people. But the swamp is really a lot of different things. And I think there are many more, and I know there are many more unelected people that influence our country and make decisions than elected people. I think we are the exception, not the rule.
Right, and you could draw these parallels to something, let's say the CCSD Board of Trustees, They have people who have been working for CCSD that are not elected. They're getting $100,000 a year to write curriculum, write policy, do all this stuff. There's way more of them than there are trustees, but meanwhile, we're all looking at the trustees when the trustees seem to have, the more I learn, no power. They got to follow the rules of the legislature, the Nevada legislature or assembly. They have to answer to the people who have been in CCSD for dozens of years. And it's not really like they could just say, oh, no CRT, we vote on it, it's done. Because it's baked into the cake.
Yeah. And there's, not that I'm against open meeting law or anything, but the reality is when you're sitting on that board, you have to have all your conversations in a public forum, which I agree with, but there's times that you don't necessarily want to hash out those things on the dais, right? You don't necessarily want to bash somebody or have an abrasive conversation. And I think a lot of people don't, they hold back because you're up there and there's a lot of dynamics at play, right? And so I'm all for transparency, but you got to understand that if you got to understand the restraints, like you said, the people that are advising them, they can't talk to each other, which means they're insulated. And the only people that they really can talk to are the insiders. And not saying that's a bad thing, but you have to understand where their flow of information is coming from, and they're generally insiders because that's all you can talk to.
Indeed. About 8 months ago, I think it was, we had both Danielle Ford and Katie Williams on separately, but they both addressed these things where if they wanted to talk about something, they can't. Because, you're allowed to talk one-on-one, but say Katie Williams texts Danielle Ford, and then Danielle Ford texts somebody else saying, oh, we were just talking about, what does anti-racism look like in CCSD? And then Danielle Ford texts another one, say Irene Cepeda, and Katie Williams doesn't know Irene Cepeda was on that text, but then Irene Cepeda texts somebody else, now Katie, and then now there's 4 people and you're violating open meeting law, when really it's just a brainstorming session or 2 trustees trying to talk about something. And they said, some of them, I forget which one it was, Danielle or Katie, that said once something gets proposed, they won't even talk to another trustee for a week in order to make sure they're abiding by open meeting law, but at the same time, they're not able to brainstorm or hash out ideas or have discourse in order to lead them to making a better decision.
Right. And, honestly, on the city council, that can be weaponized against you, and it was, and hostile people at City Hall when they were trying to basically, when they saw that I was pushing the ball and I was not just showing up and making votes, I actually was committed to doing the job. They were throwing everything, including turning me in for open meeting law violations, to try to shut me up, right? And so I'm not saying I'm against it, but you got to really, it's hard to understand the dynamics and what's going on behind the scenes.
Well, it's well-intentioned. I mean, I understand, we don't want the board meeting behind and be like, oh, let's screw Jara, you win. All right, we're all in. Let's go. Let's get rid of Jara, whether that's right or wrong. I'm just saying, we don't want them conspiring in private, but at the same time, they need to have the ability to do their due diligence in a non-nefarious way.
I agree. I couldn't agree more.
All right, so let's start getting started with your little assembly session. All right. First of all, it started off with quite a bang. You got elected. You ran against. Let's start there. All right. So you had this guy Chris Edwards, and I've heard. I'm kind of new to the scene, and but I've heard the word rhino a lot lately. What is a rhino?
Republican in name only.
What do you mean by that?
That you espouse Republican values and you say you stand for Republican values, but when it comes to voting and your actions, you tend to be more liberal.
So I guess you would be referring to something like the tax hike that came when the Republicans had the majority in the Nevada Assembly.
Yeah. Edwards was the last remaining legislator in the Assembly that had voted for the commerce tax, and also he'd worn a wire to try to implicate other GOP caucus members with bribing them. So I mean, he was really just
he wore
not
a
great
wire
guy.
to a caucus and tried to bribe people and entrap people in accepting bribes.
Yeah, not in the meeting. I don't know if it was in the meeting, but he had peeled off and had meetings with his fellow caucus members, GOPers. And I think was trying to offer them money to do for votes, and he was wearing a wire to try to implicate them. So he's a real piece of work.
Yeah, that doesn't. All right, maybe he is a Republican, and maybe he's a spy. And you're saying that this was 2014 to 2016 is when this tax hike took place.
Yeah, 2015.
So then everybody who was in there at that time in 2015 was gone except for this guy. They all got run out of town, or did they all just stop running?
No, eventually they were, I don't know their individual cases,
right,
but
in
eventually
general,
they were all gone, and he was the last man standing.
And that's what you ran your campaign on. And I heard a lot of people were pretty impressed. You crushed them. You beat them by 22 points. And then that was a brutal general election you had.
And then it was like, I'm going to take a break now.
So from June to November, you were the only one on the ballot.
Yep.
That done deal.
Yeah. So we got, it was one of those things where I was waiting till the last minute to see if somebody credible was going to run against him, because the reality is Assembly District 19 is super, super red. It's very Republican. And so I get it. If you're a Republican in a district where you're barely squeaking by, then maybe you need to be a little bit more moderate with your voting, and okay, fine. But this is a solid red district, and we had a guy that was not solid red.
Right. It's kind of like Utah and Mitt Romney. Like Utah's
right.
so red. And you would think, all right, maybe somebody in New Hampshire, a Republican in New Hampshire, has to kind of play both sides of the fence and be a little careful. But in Utah, it's the most conservative state, one of the most conservative states in our country. And you got Mitt Romney accepting this Supreme Court justice when I'm positive that the majority of Utahians,
I don't know, I'm not going to say.
But I'm sure the majority of people from Utah, especially of the Republicans, would not have supported this Supreme Court justice being approved.
Utah is a very conservative state, so I'm sure that they don't want someone who's lenient on, child predators to be a Supreme Court judge.
And then it gets back to what I was saying about you making this decision to run for Congress. You finally broke through. I mean, city council was nice, but like you said, you're fixing potholes. You got into the assembly. You made quite a name for yourself. We're going to watch some videos and stuff like this. But what, as your brand continues to grow, why wouldn't you stay in assembly for a couple more terms and like take over the assembly? Because you've made such a name for yourself. We're expecting a red wave. I mean, I've heard people talk about you being a possible, majority leader or minority leader. Heaven forbid the red wave doesn't come. It sounds like you were really about to, post your stake in the ground over there, and you're going to stop. I was hoping to see you take over Nevada politics. I mean, are you worried, or why did you leave the assembly?
Yeah, that was a big concern. The current minority leader and most of the seasoned veterans are running for higher office or they're termed out. And so there was an opening for me to go into leadership, potentially. I mean, the reality is that as much as Democrats didn't like me, a lot of Republicans didn't. When you stand out and you stand up, they're not gonna go. You make them look bad.
Well,
right?
Politicians hated Trump until he won the primary, and then they all got on board. I mean,
Right. So I would have liked to have think that I would have had a shot at minority leader, but who knows?
You mean majority leader?
Well, we'll see. I mean, with redistricting,
that was tongue in cheek. It's
yeah,
okay.
I don't know. I would love to see that, but unfortunately, Democrats.
You would be a shoo-in to win Mesquite. You'd be a shoo-in to win.
Sure.
Is it 21 or 19?
19.
19. You'd be a shoo-in to win 19. You'd be back up there. You've already got your feet under you. You could really do some things. Why take the chance? Why not wait 2 more years? Why not make a bigger name for yourself? Or do you think this is the year? Strike while the iron is hot.
I think. Look, I have more to lose in this than anybody, right? Like, this is a gamble for me. Like we talked about earlier, I ran for the first time in 2010, and then I finally made it a decade later.
Right.
So I've put in the work, and I've done everything I could to possibly get here, and I didn't quit. And so it was a huge risk, and it is a huge risk. But at the end of the day, I felt like truly, and we don't know what 2 years from now is going to look like, but right now, Stephen Horsford is vulnerable. And if we have any intention of beating him, we have to put our best candidate forward. And I mean, I just felt like I had already run 2 times in the district. I have some name ID. I've fought the system.
Right.
And so who better to do it than me? And so I felt responsibility to do it.
And we're going to get into the campaign as well as some of your competitors. But before that, I wanted to talk. Did you get elected and then obviously you had it easy in November, but then after that in January, was January 6th? It was right after you got elected in?
Yeah. Well, technically, with the way the assembly works is that on election day or when the election results are final, you're technically the person.
The representative.
Right.
For example, if sheriff, say Stan Hite gets 51% in the primary, he's the sheriff on January 18th or the next day.
No, so November,
June,
election day.
I mean. Yeah, I'm saying
you
the
have
primary.
to wait until November.
Right.
But it's not like federal offices where you don't take office till January. You're technically...
Once you're declared the winner.
Yeah, so the session isn't... There's no session during that time.
Right.
So if they were to call a special session...
You would go,
you
not
would go.
the other person.
Right.
And
In
then your
November.
responsibility is primarily the following February through April. Of course, unless there's a special session.
Right.
I'm close.
Right.
Close
Right.
enough.
Yeah.
So in that little period of time when now you are the representative from Mesquite, you are a Nevada Assemblywoman, you went to the January 6th protest.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to ask you all about it, but I'd like to see the tape first. Play tape.
Were out there. It was a lot of people. I mean, many, many times what went inside the building, and I didn't want any part of that. That wasn't what I came there for. I just went to support the president.
Newly elected Assemblywoman Annie Black of Mesquite explains how the protest outside the Capitol Wednesday took a dark turn as a mob stormed inside. This is her cell phone video of the crowd outside.
It got a little hostile, like the mood, the vibe changed, and it didn't feel like all the other rallies. People started, saying, hey, storm the barrier, storm the barrier. When I saw them go through the barrier, I went the other way because not long after that, there was a flashbang.
After seeing the images, what was your reaction?
I was shocked, really, that anybody went inside. I mean, I could see maybe going to the steps of the building, but it felt to me like we all knew you weren't supposed to be inside. Like that was a line that you just didn't cross. It was hard to see that. It really maybe tarnish the movement that we've been trying so hard to work on the last 4 years.
There's a criticism Trump fired up the crowd.
I disagree. I mean, we were not personally there to see the speech, but somebody had it on their phone and they had a megaphone, so we heard it at the Capitol. And I didn't hear anything that is triggering people to do anything or to cause violence or break into the Capitol.
Assemblywoman Black says every Trump supporter there in D.C. now faces unfair criticism. The Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee, which pushes for blue seats in state legislatures, called on 13 lawmakers who attended the rally and protest to resign.
No, I did nothing wrong. I was exercising my right to peacefully protest, and I don't see any reason that I should have to resign.
How does Nevada move forward now?
Well, I'm just hoping that our new legislature and our new representatives and our people can, not putting all of our hope and everything that we hold dear into a politician or one single person, and we can start to look at issues that affect us all the same. We all want to get back to work. We all want to be safe. We all want to have our kids in school.
So it really took some arm bending there. You were considering stepping down after the Democrats asked you to step down?
Not even a little bit.
Your response was so no. And, the one thing that I like most about this is I've watched this video a couple of times in preparing. This is the next day. Mm-hmm. I mean, you've had no time to absorb things, to learn what actually happened, to find out what was going on in different parts of Washington, D.C. And, everything you said, it's still true today. Like, the narrative hasn't changed when you tell the truth. When all these news people, and you can see the way they're trying to frame the questions at you, the narrative has completely changed, and we do know the truth. And, it's really sad to know that some people are still in jail. One person finally got acquitted of all charges because they were able to prove that the cops actually let them in. And how could you go to a federal building, the cops let you in, and then get arrested for trespassing? First tell me about your experience there. I wanted to go there with my son, but it didn't work out. And in hindsight, I'm thinking, maybe it's good I didn't go, or maybe I'd be proud for the rest of my life I went. Tell me about just the whole experience, and then you could get to how it affected you politically.
Yeah, prior to going, I had the same feelings that you have now. And I was thinking, I don't know, it's over, stick a fork in it, we're done, Biden's the president, move on, go on with your life. And it's like, we have to go. This is a historic thing. We have to be there to support the president. And, if you care at all about election integrity, you know that regardless of what happened with the election, you know that you can't change the rules prior to that close to an election and just change the rules of the game. And people are going to roll over and say everything was fair because it just anyways. So we went to support the president. As you said, I was a newly elected legislator, so when this starts happening, I'm like, I can't be part of this, right? Like, I got to get out of here.
Right.
And then I'm thinking for sure, people are going to start getting rubber bullets or whatever.
Right, or anything, gas, whatever.
Right, they were not going to let this fly, right? And it was happening, and I just remember thinking, this is crazy. I can't believe they're letting people do this. But that was the thing. We were standing there, and we can hear people saying, the cops are letting people come through. They're letting people come through. And people were saying that. And then there's other people that are saying, storm the barrier. And there's Trump supporters that are saying, they're not MAGA. They're not with us. People are literally yelling
pointing
this.
At them.
And the barriers are coming back. People are kind of picking them up. And Trump supporters are putting them back.
I saw some of those videos as well.
And so we could hear people saying, I was not at the front, but I can hear people saying, they're going to let us in. They're letting us in. And you can clearly see that in hindsight. And we knew there were agitators there. When you go to a Trump rally, you don't generally see people wearing all black in black helmets and masks.
Like Antifa.
None of us, this was COVID time, right? We still weren't wearing masks at that time. Conservatives have generally been pretty adamant that masks don't work. Right. And so when you see someone wearing all black in a mask and a helmet, you think that doesn't belong here.
You saw the pictures of you. You've been to the Capitol a number of times. You've participated in protests or supports and stuff like that. And you said something like this was all of a sudden the whole mood, everything was normal in the beginning, just like any other time you've attended the Capitol. And then all of a sudden something changed. Can you tell me about that moment?
We were briefly at the ellipse, I think it is, for the president's speech. And then I thought, oh, I want to get over to the Capitol real quick because we heard he was going to speak over there and we were kind of far away.
And he said, let's go over to the Capitol peacefully and whatever.
So we go over there thinking, oh, we're going to miss this speech, but when he comes over there, we'll have a better spot. So we go over there. But before we left, the vibe there was good. Everybody was happy. I mean, not happy, but it was like
a typical Trump rally.
People were,
minus the fact that he lost the election.
Right. So the vibe was it was nice. It was like a typical Trump rally. And then we went over to the Capitol, and it was still fine. And we were listening to the speech on people's phone. And then all of a sudden, as people started coming, it was just a different vibe. Like you could tell there were people that wanted to agitate something, and I'm probably going to take, crap for saying that.
Nobody watches the Johnny Brew Show. Go for it.
You could tell there was like an agitation that was happening, and it was, on the brink. Something was on the brink that was going to happen. And in hindsight, in retrospect, people tell me, well, I knew that was going to happen. I can't believe you went there. And I was like, I truly, legitimately didn't expect that to happen.
I wanted to bring my son there. You think I would bring my 18-year-old son to something where I think he might be locked up in the gulag for 2 years or not be able to get a job or, obviously, me personally, I wish I was there because I believe in it. But at the same time, I'm really glad I didn't bring my son there because what if, we got caught up in the wrong gaggle of people or saw something or, just got wrapped up in it the wrong way, which a lot of people seem to have done.
And as a legislator, thank God I didn't do anything. And let's be honest, they know who was there. They knew it from day one. They knew, who had gone in. But they would love nothing more than to throw a conservative legislator in prison for that. Right? I mean, that would be like a dream come true. BuzzFeed and all those guys chastised me and, tried to get me to resign. And I knew I did nothing wrong. And so, you just got to stand on that.
We were talking about stuff like they just passed a law about you can't discriminate against a hairstyle when somebody gets a job. And, and they need to make these laws and these regulations so specific that you lose sight of the reason why you're making the law. For example, if you were to dye your hair blue, but do it really professionally, it's different from if you on Halloween you spray paint your hair blue. Like there's a different, and what we're trying to do is have an air of professionalism. And I still feel like somebody with blue hair could look like a professional, while somebody else with blue hair could look like they're a Halloween costume, And we're not really addressing the fact that, all right, we need to look professional at work. It doesn't matter what color hair it is. You just need to look professional. But I guess in a law, you can't write looks professional because it's so subjective.
Right. Well, I'm a boomer like that because I don't really think you should have blue hair at work. But I think you're right. Like the bottom line is, like we were talking about earlier with your students, it's accountability and setting expectations. And I think from all levels, whether it's from the family to our own personal behavior, standards have really been lowered, and people will perform based on what you expect, right?
Well, and here's another example. So say you're in the assembly, and you're supposed to be professional, and you refuse to wear a mask, and somebody disagrees with that. But you just said, I don't think that blue hair is very professional, and they have blue hair. Would you try to censure someone the way they tried to censure you about your mask?
No, I mean, look, that was that whole thing was a scam. It was just so frustrating. You would leave the building and everybody there's a bar there where they all do karaoke on Tuesday night or whatever night. And that's fine. I don't have a problem with that at all. More power to you. But they go in there like sardines to sing karaoke and get hammered.
Drunk and hug and sing.
Right, and dance, and it's literally packed in there. And then you're coming in, and every county, including Clark, had declared that they were going to lift the mask mandate. And I just thought, we're not allowing people to come into their legislature. We're not allowing lobbyists, love them or hate them, because they do serve a purpose in some instances, right? Like, they do have institutional knowledge that you need. To come in here and be part of the legislative process. You're keeping us all sequestered in our offices. It's not a way to legislate. And
right.
It was a joke.
Well, I
frankly.
mean, let's see what you said about it on the floor. This is you probably making the biggest waves, and I think this is what was the beginning of your rising star right here. Play tape.
Assemblywoman Black.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, order of business 15.
Order of business 15.
Mr. Speaker, last night the Golden Knights beat the Minnesota Wild 5-4 in overtime before a crowd of 2,605 people in Las Vegas. Article 4, Section 15 of the Nevada Constitution requires the doors of each house shall be kept open during the session. In addition, Article 1, Section 10 guarantees the people shall have the right to freely assemble together to consult for the common good, to instruct their representatives, and to petition the legislature for redress of grievances. This building is locked to these people, and they deserve better. Local governments are opening, businesses are open. It is time the legislature was open to the public. It is ridiculous that my sons can play football, but they cannot visit me in this building. I can go to a casino in Mesquite, but a constituent from Mesquite cannot visit me in this building. Members of the Assembly, the Senate, and employees of the legislature can go to dinner in restaurants in Carson City, but the employees of those restaurants cannot come to see us in this building. The doors of each house in this building are not being kept open, and we have taken away the right of the people to assemble to instruct us, their representatives. Mr. Speaker, it is hypocritical for us to have this building closed but allow businesses in Nevada to be open. Either it is safe or it is unsafe to allow people into buildings. The legislature should either close all businesses or open our doors. If it is safe to allow people from across the world into our casinos, it is safe to allow people into this building. If it is safe to allow people to go to Golden Knights games, a crowd of 2,605, it is safe to allow people in this building. If it is safe for high school football players to play football, it is safe to allow people into this building. You cannot have it both ways. Mr. Speaker, order of business 8. I move we open the legislative building under the same safety procedures as required of Walmart, bars, casinos, grocery stores, and other businesses.
I would second that motion, Mr. Speaker.
Mr.
Mr. Speaker, per Mason's Manual of Legislative Procedure, Section 245, 241, I appeal the ruling of the Speaker.
All right. Wow. All right. Let's start at the end. They didn't want to hear nothing. They're like, let's go on a recess. They didn't even say thanks for speaking or anything. Yeah. They just ran right out the door. Second of all, like I said, this is the beginning of, at least for me, I'm new to this and stuff like that, but this is when I really started to hear about you and became a big fan. But you got this reputation of being this outlandish, far-right, crazy kook. I don't understand. Like, it just sounds like you're just speaking common sense. Listen, they're having nights games. You know, you're going to karaoke. Clark County is open. We're inviting people from all over the world to come to our casinos. Why are we putting on this charade? It didn't sound like you were like this crazy person flouting science and, you know, talking down to all these people. It sounded very regular, fact-based questions.
I thought so. You know, I think the reality is that it's much easier to do bad things in a legislature or any government when there's no transparency and there's no sunlight. And right. when you have people participating in the legislative process through like television and phone, there can be glitches, right? People can be cut off, your call didn't go through. And so I don't want to, be a conspiracy theorist, but...
Well, you already are because you're a Republican, right? But go ahead.
But, the bottom line is I think that you can get away with a lot more when people aren't there to watch. And I don't think they wanted that.
Right. I mean, we could get into the election with, blocking the view and stuff like that, or closing the people's house, which is another thing you had a problem with. But I got the response. So after you gave that thing, they didn't give you a response. Like I said, they just called a recess, and you immediately knew what to do and disagreed with their thing. But then the next day, this news report came out. You have the one from the RJ?
Mm-hmm. This one?
Please. I hope we don't get any ads. Play tape.
This morning, sponsored by Carnegie Heights, the legislature's deadline for most bills is today, but one lawmaker won't be able to vote or speak unless she's ready to apologize.
Assemblywoman Annie Black from Mesquite, she's a Republican,
was stripped of her rights to vote and to speak on the floor of the assembly because she wouldn't wear a mask pursuant to the CDC guidelines. On a motion by one of the majority Democrats, on a party line vote, Annie Black was stripped of her rights to vote. She can't vote or speak on the assembly floor until she's ready to apologize for not following that rule.
Wow. All right. First of all, you have to apologize. Before you even start, I messed up my things. That was actually in response to you fighting the masks. And this is you on the assembly, the second time I heard of you speaking on the assembly about the mask rules.
Vegas fully recovered from the pandemic.
Business 15?
City officials say
Thank you.
pretty much yes. Review Journal.
Mr. Speaker, the Centers for Disease Control has said that those who have had and recovered from the COVID virus have natural immunity and that, quote, current evidence suggests that reinfection with the virus is uncommon. And a week ago, the CDC announced that people who have received the vaccine no longer need to wear masks. Since that announcement, major employers such as Costco, Sam's Club, Walmart, Target, CVS, Starbucks, Home Depot, Lowe's, and Best Buy all have announced they will no longer require masks in their stores. In addition, a number of Nevada resorts and casinos have gone mask-free. And yet, the Nevada legislature continues to insist that everyone wear a mask here in this building unless cloistered alone in their office. This makes no sense, especially since legislators and staff were put at the head of the line for vaccination months ago. Anyone wishing to get vaccinated has had more than enough time to do so. The fact is, the science now says vaccinated individuals no longer need to wear a mask. Dr. Fauci himself stated yesterday that, quote, the chances of getting infected in an indoor setting is extremely low for those who have been vaccinated. Even our own governor has been appearing at public events without a mask for the past week. So it's especially absurd to require masks here on the floor of the assembly where we're not only sufficiently social distance, but separated by plexiglass shields. This isn't following the science, this is political theater. And by insisting that people who have been vaccinated or have had the virus continue to wear masks, we're sending mixed signals to Nevadans and confusing them. This body should lead by example. And that means following the CDC guidance that masks are no longer necessary in this building for those who have been vaccinated or who have already had and recovered from the COVID virus. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I will remind the body that we have passed and have rules, and there are consequences to violating those rules. And so I would recommend that every member read those rules and recognize that the consequences are up to and including the inability to vote or be heard on the floor until the behavior is addressed to the satisfaction of the body.
All right, now I gotta apologize to you guys. My beautiful producer was right on point. I called for the videos out of order. So just to recap what we saw, first, you were speaking about the ridiculousness of closing the State House. Then you were talking about the ridiculousness of a mask and vaccine mandate when you've either recovered or when other people don't have to wear masks or you're socially distanced and you got plexiglass. And then they said, let me remind you, you could be censured. And then you were censured, which we saw on the news report that we played out of order. Give me a whole, I mean, you know, I was going to address these things one at a time, but you could do the whole kit and caboodle for me. What was that month like?
You know, that it escalated quickly. I'm proud to say that same day after I gave that speech, they didn't censure me the same day, but that day they opened the legislature. So it was then open to the public. Then the next day, they came in and censured me. And I wasn't allowed to vote or come to the floor for 2 days. And then, unfortunately, when you're in the legislative session, you can't raise money. So I couldn't do a political action fund, and I couldn't...
You're literally suspended.
Right.
You got to go home and watch The Price is Right and whatever soap opera was on.
I mean, I just hung out there. And fortunately, you know, they allowed me to vote from my office. And I was told at the time, hey, you know, if you do this, your opponents in the future are probably going to hold it against you that you missed votes and they're going to take it out of context. And my opinion about the session remains the same as it was then today, as it was then, was that you only get one shot, right? You may never get elected again. You may never go back. You may never have that privilege or that honor. And so it felt like the right thing to do at the time. And I went with it, even though some people were saying it probably wasn't the greatest idea.
I would have given you the opposite advice. I mean, I think it's one of the reasons why you're one of the most popular Republican politicians in Nevada is because of the stance you took. And then you also look at things like Trump's presidency. I say a lot, they say, oh, he didn't reduce the deficit enough. And I truly believe that was part of his second term plan. Let me get some stuff going. Let me rebuild the military. Let me do this, that, the other thing. The second term, I'll reduce the deficit and put some stuff for anti-regulation and stuff like that. But he didn't get the second term because, like you said, you never know if you're going to get that opportunity again. I think it was great. And then censoring you, I mean, can they really block your ability to vote when you've been voted in by the people of your district?
I think it would be an interesting case to litigate. Unfortunately, like I said, I just wasn't in a position to be able to raise money. And unfortunately, on the Republican side, we don't have a slew of attorneys that are just willing to take cases for pro bono. But and also at that point, I had every intention of coming back to the legislature. I mean, I know that there are probably people that think, whatever, my decisions were made up at that point, but they really weren't.
Right.
And I just thought...
Well, at that point, you're not even that as popular as you are now. I mean, this is kind of... So, I mean, I don't think you're thinking, oh, I'm going to, get out of here and move on up. Yeah, I mean, I believe at this point in your career, and you would know better than me, that you were planning on being an assemblywoman for a couple of terms.
Yeah, that was my plan.
All right. So it worked. I think it worked. I mean, also the way I found out about a lot of this stuff is you started doing, I don't know if you hired the right marketing team or if you did it yourself or if you have a wonderful producer like I might have, but you were doing these things called anagrams where you were giving us updates from the legislative session and you were talking to the people directly from your mouth about what's going on there, about your side of things and about what you were trying to do for the people in your district as well as all of Nevada. Whose idea was these anagrams? Do you think that's another reason why you became so popular? And is this something you're looking to continue?
100%. I can't even take credit for that. It's the brain trust of Chuck Muth. He's a great writer and a great friend. And I think, fortunately, along the way, I've been blessed to be surrounded by really talented and gifted people. And, it feels a little bit like you're in a band, right? Like you're the front person, but there's a lot of things happening behind the scenes. And I 100% attribute most of my notoriety in the state to the anagram newsletters and how effective those have been. And it's really hard to replicate that. Most political newsletters and correspondence are just garbage. I mean, I don't know how else to say it.
Right, they all look the same.
Right, you could slap anybody's logo on it and it could come from any political candidate. And I think the thing was we actually had value. There was something of value there. And people got to look inside the legislature that they never got before. And I love doing it. And it's rewarding to go all over the state and hear, hey, I love your anagrams. I love your anagrams.
Right.
And,
hopefully it'll set a precedent and we'll start getting more transparency and we'll get more people. Maybe the Johnny Brew Show will head up to the thing since you're not going to be doing anagrams. Maybe I'll have to go up there and find out what's going on for the people. What was I going to say? I always forget my next point. What was I going to say? I forgot. All right. So let's start talking about some of the things because you're going to go from state politics and now you're looking to go to federal politics. Mm-hmm. So let's address a couple of things that you're going to be facing that's new because obviously you're going from potholes in Mesquite to school policy on the assembly to now federal policy, which runs the gamut from foreign affairs to what's going on in Ukraine to the border to crime around the country and stuff like that. First of all, our economy is falling apart. If you use the old metrics, we're looking at 15 or 16% inflation. Mm-hmm. With the new watered down metrics, we're still looking at 8% inflation. Gas is more than double. I know right before election day in 2020, I was paying about $2.05 a gallon in gas. And now I'm driving far and wide just to find it under $5, which I can't even do. So you're talking about more than double the price in gas. Since 2010, Las Vegas rental prices have tripled over the past 12 years. Wages have gone up percentage points while, the other things are going up by orders of magnitude. So what can, obviously Nevada's hit hardest, whether it's 2008 or 2020, because we're a hospitality industry and we're not very diverse. What can you do in Congress to not only help Nevadans, but help the country as a whole get out of this disaster?
I mean, I think I'm going to do the same things that I did on the city council and in the state legislature. And like I said earlier, there's always what you think it's going to be, and then there's what it actually is, right? But I think fundamentally my beliefs, my core values, and I've proven this from the city council to the state legislature, are lower taxes, limited government, limited spending, and less regulation. And those values are what everything that I do comes from, right? Whether it was taking off a mask, or one of my bills in the legislature was to end the governor's declaration of emergency and cut the state business license fee, because that was being weaponized against people to keep people's businesses shut down. And so, where we're going to be in after the election and where we're going to be economically and what that's going to look like, who knows? But what I can tell you is I'm always going to be coming from the place of those core values, and that's going to be my focus.
Lower taxes, less regulation, fiscal responsibility.
Yeah.
I mean, because you look at something like CCSD, they have a $5.2 billion per year budget. Mm-hmm. And they're always screaming, we need more money, we need more money. I think really they just need an audit and find out where the money is going, and let's spend it a little more fiscally responsible, right?
Well, it's proof positive that you can't just throw money at something and expect a positive result.
Right. And then we talked about it a little bit, but we're talking about elections. There's mail-out ballots and ballot harvesting. What was a felony in all 50 states 4 years ago is now legal here in Nevada. What do you want to do? And then also you brought up the fact that even in other states, for example, the Pennsylvania legislature struck down a bill in order to do something about mail-out ballots or something like that. And even though the legislator struck it down, who has the power to make election law, the Secretary of State and the governor of Pennsylvania said, no, we're going to do it anyway. You talk about the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop. That might not be a political election integrity issue, but it's definitely an election integrity issue overall because they're controlling the narrative. What specific about elections do you want to see addressed?
Federally, I think that we definitely need to have ID to vote. I think that's something that's well within the federal government's, within the Congress and the Senate's ability to pass. I do think that bills regulating mail-in ballots and ballot harvesting are definitely for the states to decide. But the good news is, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds here, but if we do pick up some seats, and if we do hold the seats that we have, even if we don't pick up some seats, there is hope, and there was hope last session with AB 321, with the mail-in ballots and all that, is that ultimately, as long as we're out of the super minority, we can hold money. We can hold money hostage from the Democrats or whoever's in power, if that happens to stay that way. And we should have, and we didn't. And we can use that as leverage to basically what they say in the legislature is turn a steak knife into a butter knife. I hate that expression because I don't want any knives, but we failed. We failed to hold the line on those money votes and use our leverage where we had it. But we get another shot next time. So hopefully we have quality legislators that will hold the line and do some negotiating and not just bend over and take it.
Well, speaking of your time in Assembly, I had this one conversation. You actually gave me some fodder because somebody was saying, oh, freshman Assembly people, they don't know what they're doing. They don't write bills. They don't do anything. You said you wrote the maximum amount of bills that you were allowed to write. I also wanted to ask you about game theory. I mean, I understand we all have our morals. We all believe, here on the Johnny Brew Show, we say conservatism, small government at home, America first abroad, and a love for our founding documents. That's what basically guides my ship. But at the same time, then when you're an Assembly person, it's also about game. You have to win. You have to play the game to win. Even if it's not exactly the way you want to do it, you got to figure out how can we win. If you're in a super minority, can you slow the process down so they can make less fanatical changes to the way our state is run? If you're in the majority, can you push through as many things as you can? I feel like Trump should have gotten more done in his first 2 years in office because that's when he had the opportunity. Tell me about the gamesmanship and the game theory that you used as an Assemblywoman and how that differs from the rah-rah of being an activist.
I took a pro with me. I had a person who was a not only a pro at policy, but also in Mason's rules, right? Because a lot of it is procedural, which you saw when they were cutting me off.
Right, at the end, I disagree, and you said some statute.
And so you don't realize until you get there how much of this is procedure, right? And behind the scenes, you're whipping votes, or you're talking to this person, trying to get support, bipartisan support. And there's a lot of stuff that goes on. And you definitely, I think from a leadership standpoint, I think we failed as Republicans to hold our party together. And, I think that's why it's been said that I defected from the Republican Party, because I chose not to join the Republican caucus. Part of the reason I didn't join the Republican caucus is for that exact reason. We lacked leadership. We lacked any game strategy.
Right.
And there was just a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that I didn't agree with. So it wasn't that I defected from the Republican Party. It was that I felt I was more Republican and wanted to hold more true to my conservative values, and that our caucus was going to sell us out.
Not fighting hard enough.
Right.
Well, I mean, that's really interesting, because as we continue to move along, everybody's predicting a red wave. But at the same time, there's a lot of Republican factions here in Nevada that are at each other's throats. And there's a lot of, mudslinging that, it's tough for me, because I want all Republicans to be united, but at the same time, if somebody is a rhino, I don't want them in. I think I would rather have a Democrat, because I know they're against me, as opposed to a Republican who's going to raise taxes or intensify regulation. So what do you think is going to happen with the Republican Party, most notably over the next 6 months? Do you think we're going to be at each other's throats, or do you think we're going to unify?
I think, unfortunately, party politics today is what party politics have been as long as I've been involved, and there unfortunately are factions. And don't get hey, I'm the first one to call somebody out if I don't feel that they're being conservative enough. But the difference is, I will call someone out based on real, actual, true, how they voted, or what their actions, right? Like, I've got people talking about me right now, saying things that are outrageous, that they're just making up, right? And so it's like
what?
Look,
Share.
if you
come on, give me some.
The defecting from the Republican Party thing, and things like that, and I voted for this, and I'm like, well, you can't just say things. You have to put up or shut up, right? If you're gonna call somebody out, make sure it's factual, make sure it's on their record, and you have every ability to do that, because we're all responsible for our record.
And it's public.
But you can't just make stuff up about people, and you can't just slander people and be... and I feel like, unfortunately, that's where we are on a lot of these things. Like, if you want to call me out for my record, cool. But I think a lot of the inter-party stuff, it's personal stuff, and it has nothing to do with...
And you seem to be out of it. I mean, during all this stuff, I never hear your name coming up, Republicans saying, oh, I don't like her, I do like her, or people arguing about you. You seem, I didn't hear so much of the defecting from the Republican Party. Maybe I'm not higher up enough. But from the little infighting I've been seeing, everybody seems to be a fan of yours. We're going to wrap up, but what I do want to do before we finish is I just want to talk about a couple other the issues, and you could just tell people how you feel about it. I know you're a big supporter of the Second Amendment. What does that mean to you? And are you talking about constitutional carry? Are you talking about shall not be infringed whatsoever? What does that mean to you?
Ultimately, I think we already have constitutional carry based on the Constitution. But, I think at the end of the day right now, short-term goal is probably a 50-state reciprocity, right? That's the people that I've talked to that are the two-way experts say we would all love to have constitutional carry, right? That's returning to that is the ultimate goal. But the short-term goal, if we're taking bites at the apple, is at least to have reciprocity for our concealed carries across 50 states.
And what does reciprocity mean?
Means that if I have a CCW here, I can carry in any of the 50 states.
Right, so if you go to St. George or something in Utah, you could still bring your gun with you.
Yeah, and not even that. I mean, sometimes I think if you're going through cities, you can be in violation if if your ammo's not in the trunk, or
right. So in Washington D.C., your ammo has to be in the trunk, and then you get to Delaware, the ammo can't be in the same vehicle, and then you go somewhere else, and you can have it loaded, and next thing you know, you don't know what state you happen to be in because you've been driving all night.
Right.
What about right to life, abortion situations?
I think we have to protect the right to life from the born and the unborn, right? That's our job, and I believe in that. So.
But sometimes people have different opinions of when does life begin, when you could feel a heartbeat, when you could feel pain, when you could live outside the womb. Do you have a particular stance on when the right for life begins?
Well, this is a tough question. I'm not gonna lie. My personal opinion on the right to life, I agree with the heartbeat bill, right? Like that's when life begins. But I think going back to what we talked about earlier with the blue hair, is it professional, is it not professional? I think I tend to agree with the fact that you can't legislate morality, right? Like I'm not going to be able to put a law on someone and say you shouldn't kill someone else, because if that worked, we wouldn't have murders, right? I think there's a bigger problem that we have to tackle in society about abortion and about marriage and family and a lot of things that we can't just fix by slapping a law on it.
I just saw a meme on a Democratic Facebook page, and it said, we have too many Republicans and too much religion in this country. That's what they wrote. And I feel like that's the one thing we're lacking is I don't know why people would be against religion. Like even if you were an atheist, why would you be against other people having a moral code and trying to do the right thing? What is it about Christians that rubs Democrats the wrong way?
It's counter to their whole agenda, right? Anti-family, anti-God, it feels like the movement that has just been a plan for many years is just kind of coming to fruition, and
that's another problem is Democrats seem to be planning 10, 20, 30 years ahead.
Right.
Well, we're always trying to just keep our head above the water.
We're always playing defense. We need to be thinking longer term.
And then what about the border? I mean, we just had revelation where I didn't even understand this was happening, but now in the news this week they're talking about some COVID protocol is being lifted so more illegal immigrants can come in, and I didn't think it was possible that any more illegal immigrants could be pouring over our borders than have for the past 14 months, but apparently they're saying now with this restriction being lifted, and we love deregulating, I don't know about this one, but they're saying now twice as many people might be coming in. I mean, and we're literally, I don't think people understand that this isn't a drop in the bucket anymore. These are millions and millions and millions, approaching 1-2% of the people in our country. So what do you think needs to be done at the border?
We definitely need to secure the border and finish the wall, but I think a lot of it, especially like we're seeing in the situation with Russia and the Ukraine and the whole world really, is that a lot of what happens is a repercussion of the outside world viewing us as having a strong leader or a weak leader, right? Like a lot of things start to change just based on how they perceive the leader of our country.
Whether it's Afghanistan, China, or Mexico.
And that's all the way from, does our president respect Border Patrol, right? And clearly they don't. We've seen that Border Patrol's been attacked. And so I think outside forces that wish us harm see weakness and they prey on it. And I think that's what we're seeing. So we need the wall. We need to support Border Patrol. We need to I think actually those people that are waiting online that have legally been waiting, let's get them here. We need them.
Those are the people that are getting screwed the most out of this.
They want to come here legally and do it right. Let's get them here. We need those people.
Well, I just had somebody come in from overseas, and they had to take, they're from South America, so they took a COVID vaccine that wasn't approved in America. So then they had to take more vaccines. They've ended up taking 5 vaccines just to visit our country because of our protocols. And the red tape and the visa and everything else and the plane, when meanwhile you have somebody who's just walking across the border unfettered. Now, I don't believe that anybody should be required to have a vaccine, but how could you punish people who are trying to do things the right way and reward people who are just flouting our laws?
And you have to consider, too, which I know the other side doesn't like to look at, this is a humanitarian problem. We have people, kids, women, men being trafficked, being used as drug mules, being left in the desert for dead. And that's happening all day, every day. And not just illegal immigrants, but terrorists, right? That's a whole nother ball of wax with the open border situation where we're apprehending people coming across the border from all over the place.
Right. And I mean, since you bring it up, Putin is ex-KGB. I mean, they love spies, they love war games, they love all this stuff. As soon as we start putting sanctions on them, you don't think Putin's like going to send a team of 12 commandos to go over the border and do whatever kind of stuff they do, whether it's like hearing, poisoning, and stuff like that? You know, they've got all these weird ways of practicing war without guns and on the battlefield. I mean, you don't think that these are things that we need to be concerned about?
Well, yeah, especially since we always want to do everything with one leg and one arm tied behind our back because we're tying the hands of Border Patrol or our military or our police. And you can't, the world doesn't fight like that. Bad guys don't fight like that.
Right.
They don't fight fair.
Right, and we already have one arm tied. Like, for example, if we're going to fight a drug cartel, they're going to do whatever they got to do to win, and we're going to not kill civilians. We're going to try our best to go within the modality of the law. So we already have a shortcoming. But then when your boss doesn't support you, you know, if you're a Border Patrol agent, how would you feel? You're sitting there signing people in so they could go into the country when your job is to protect the border.
Yeah, well, that just makes me think of, you know, the that Republicans are so harsh and we don't care about civilians, but wasn't it Biden who just bombed like civilians and killed family members?
That was in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
The guy was transporting water, and they thought he was transporting like missiles or something, or IEDs. And then the subject that I think is most important is education. I mean, I believe the way we mold our children are malleable. I mean, I'm sorry. If you're going to brainwash a child, it's going to work every time. They're very malleable. What do you think needs to be done? Education shouldn't even be a federal priority. But meanwhile, it's a subject that somebody in Congress would have to address. I mean, is your number one goal to get education out of the federal jurisdiction, or what would you like to do?
I would love to abolish the Department of Education completely and take the power to educate our kids back to the lowest, smallest community level. And honestly, like just talking to you about your math tutoring and stuff like that, I'm not an education expert, but I know there are people who are. And sometimes I feel like we tend to overcomplicate it. You flat out said that if we just held kids to a higher standard, that they would perform better. And I think that's in all areas of life. Like look at voter ID, right? We're saying that certain people can't have ID to vote because they can't be trusted to get ID because what kind of level are you holding people at? And I think that...
Well, you know, I've always inquire, and I always tell somebody who I'm discussing this with, name one person who wasn't able to vote in the 2020 election. Name somebody who has been suppressed, who can't vote because of ID or because of the Republicans' horrible policies. And you can never name one person.
I can.
They finally named one person in 2004. It was a handicapped woman or something or other, but it was one person in 20 years. What do you got?
I bet you know a lot of people that went to vote that showed up and said someone already voted for them.
Right, I did hear
there
about
was a lot of
those.
And those are in abundance. You can hear people telling that story all day long.
I didn't see it on the news.
Well,
I've heard it on
fit the
Facebook
narrative,
here and
right?
there.
Right. I've heard it from the horse's mouth. I've had people tell me they went to vote and they were already told they couldn't vote because they had already voted.
And then are they able to look up who they supposedly voted for?
Of course not.
Yeah, that's not suspicious,
right? But I think as far as education, you know, don't overcomplicate it. Get back to teaching the basic reading, writing, and math. And the scary thing, it was a meme on social media, but it's so true. Is like in China they're teaching their kids complex math, and over here we're teaching our kids about their gender,
you could be a girl,
right? Like you could be a mermaid, right, or a witch or whatever. Like it's insane.
Right. Well, the same thing happened. I saw the meme a year ago. What the Chinese army's doing, they're trying to become the manliest manly men ever, and we're sitting there showing our maternity flight suits, like just in case a 6-month pregnant woman is going to be driving an F-14 over Ukraine.
It's insane. We're insane.
And finally, I know you support the veterans. I know you like to address the veterans. What would you like to see? What kind of services do you think would improve veterans' lives?
So I've been doing some research lately on veterans, and because I am not a veteran, but I do from what I'm reading and learning is that we invest a ton of money into getting people ready to go and serve in the military, and whether that's clearance or training or moving them around and education. But when you get out of the military, you're kind of just plopped out, right? There's no real exit plan from what I understand. So again, I mean, I think that we can improve there. And then I think if you serve your country, you should get quality health care. Like, we have people in Mesquite that have to get in a bus or a van that the Veterans Center has and drive them to Vegas to go to the VA hospital.
Yeah, that's not convenient.
Right. And it's just unfortunate because, we're already living in a society where service is dwindling.
Right.
Less and less people are joining up, and we're...
Well, people are concerned that the administration may be pulling doctors and medical personnel away from the VAs in order to start treating the millions of illegal immigrants we have coming in here. And are we actually taking away from our veterans to supply medical treatment to them? Just like we were talking about that 2 years ago when we were putting illegal immigrants in hotel rooms while veterans were sleeping outside, not allowed to go into the hotel to bother the illegal immigrants because they were homeless. It's
gotta
crazy.
have priorities, and your priorities gotta be your own house first. You can't fix and help other things unless you get your own house in order.
Now, you have all this great marketing, all these great videos, your own YouTube video. You don't have the campaign video of you driving a pickup truck and shooting bottles and driving on the train and talking about Nevada.
I know, when I was watching your show, I was like, oh, we're not gonna be able to watch my campaign video and make fun of it.
Right.
Because I didn't do one. I have learned that there's a lot of people that are going to tell you to do a lot of things in campaigns. You need to do more of this, you need to do this, you need to do this. And there's a lot of people that have a lot of ideas and input. But, spending $15,000, $30,000, $50,000 on a campaign video, it feels very egotistical, and it's great.
Fiscally irresponsible.
Right. And, seeing your face on a billboard. The reality is the best thing that you can do is talk directly to voters, and the money that I could have spent on a video I could communicate with every single voter in my district once.
Now, but do you have problems? I have problems on Facebook and YouTube. Just because I'm a conservative, they don't put out our messages. Are you finding trouble with that? Because I know you like to talk directly to people. Social media used to be the best avenue for you to reach people directly, but I'm guessing you're going to get some of the same treatment I am. Have you found yourself to be shadow banned or blacklisted or suppressed?
I may have been shadow banned or felt like I was at some point. Fortunately, I haven't been openly banned or censored, but that's why we focus so much on the emails as well. Right. It's like, at some point you're going to get shut down. And so we always say that, hey, look, if you like what we're doing, if you follow our social media, sign up for the newsletter, because at any time you could be censored and shut down. And we need a way to still be able to communicate with our people. And I think we've become too reliant on social media and
trusting. Yeah,
we need to have backup plans.
All right. Well, in lieu of a campaign video, why don't we make one right now? How much you want to charge it? Free? We like Annie Black? All right.
You got some good music you can play?
We'll figure something out later. But for now, let's just get the copy, all right? I want you to look into the camera and tell everybody why you're the correct person to vote for in Congressional District 4.
My name is Annie Black. I am Nevada State Legislature in Assembly District 19. You know me. You know the fight that I've taken to our state legislature. You know that I'm a proven winner. I beat a 3-term incumbent. I can beat Stephen Horsford in this district. I've raised the money to do it. I've got the support to do it, but I can't do it without you. So go to anniefornevada.com, sign up for the newsletter, and I would really appreciate your vote.
Beautiful. And it's just you, Sam Peters, and Chance Bonaventura.
That's correct.
So really it's between you and Sam, who ran last year. Are you worried about, I haven't really heard Sam being called a rhino or anything. He was on the show once before. Are you going to have more trouble campaigning against a Republican who may not be a rhino?
I'm not going to lie and say that it's easy, because the whole point of a campaign is to contrast yourself with the other person, right? And since I'm not going to say anything negative about Sam, I can't say the same for him, but since I'm not going to do that, I have to figure out some way to contrast. And the biggest comparison I can make and to contrast myself with him is to say, it's really easy for politicians to tell you things, and they do it all the time, and they tell you they're going to do things and they lie to you. So I can tell you, you trust, but you verify. And the thing that I can say about me is that I've gone to the legislature, I've been at the state or at the city council, and so you can verify that when I've told you I'm going to do something, I do it, and usually above and beyond. And so To me, it's a proven winner and a proven entity or a gamble.
And if you're victorious, why are you better than Stephen Horsford? I knew he'd get a laugh out of that. I tried to say it with a straight face, and I couldn't either. But please.
You know, I haven't personally confirmed this, but I heard when Horsford lost to Crescent Hardy, he never moved back to Nevada. And I think Horsford exemplifies everything that we do not want in a public servant. He's not committed to Nevada. He's not living in Nevada. His kids didn't go to our schools when they were shut down. He's living in Virginia or DC or doing whatever he's doing. And he's always been part of the establishment. Before he was a politician, he was working for the unions. And so he's never been a business owner. He's certainly not suffering with people of Congressional District 4 right now. He's living in his ivory tower in DC. And we need somebody that's here in the trenches with us, and that's me. And I'll fight for you. You know, you can always count on me fighting for you.
Bet on Black?
Bet on Black.
Where can people buy your merchandise and donate and find out more?
Annie for Nevada, FOR or the number 4, either one, Annie for Nevada.
Beautiful. Well, there you have it, guys. That's 90 minutes with Annie Black, an episode I've been really looking forward to. Continue to follow us here on the Johnny Brew Show, Rumble, YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, anywhere you get your multimedia information. We're on Facebook. Guys, you literally have to go to my page to see the stuff, but there's so much great material there. Check out Common Sense Nevada, the Public Square, as well as the new Board of Trustees for CCSD for 2022 and 2024. Find out all the people running for CCSD School Board and everybody running in all the races. We're trying to follow everything. And also, the first time I'm going to say something out loud, on June 14th, there is going to be incredible Nevada primary coverage. Johnny Brew is going to be a part of it with some other really big media personalities here in Nevada. More details to come, but keep your ear out for that. And on behalf of Annie Black, my name is John Brookhagen. This is the Johnny Brew Show.